One thing I did notice, the other side of that, they announced the additional money. Lucas Oil did. They also put out the series schedule for next year. And one other thing, the 25,000 wins on Saturday, all 25,000 or more on Saturdays, added money there and all. One other thing I noticed was they got Speed Weeks in Florida, Georgia, and they got Smoky Mountain in June.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's there are no Lucas Oil races in the South.
Yeah. Well, if you count Batesville, the topless, but it's not the Southeast.
No,
sure.
no, not Southeast.
But no, I mean, I'm sure some people wherever you're from may not have seen. I feel like when the schedule came out, that was the big takeaway that I saw on social media. But that's because obviously we're in the Southeast and we
got a lot of guys,
people, that we follow, But there was a big, like people are, obviously it started before that was. I mean, it was the same scenario this year, but people were kind of hoping you'd see some more Southeastern tracks on the schedule, and it didn't happen. It's unfortunate, I mean, I guess obviously speed weeks are a big deal, but it's not like one that's
sort of disconnected.
Yeah, it's I
guess,
and yeah, Smoky Mountain, but that's just dipping your toe in the Southeast. It really is what that's doing. I don't know, when you see like tracks being replaced on the schedule, like I noticed Tri-City Speedway in Illinois is not on the schedule, and that race went to Wheatland, Lucas Oil Speedway, and you already had
almost like taking a race from, I don't want to say like North Wilkesboro and sending it to California, but it's do we need another race?
That's what I was going to say. So not only that, but Tyler County Speedway and the Hillbilly, which they're going through a ownership change and management change, and that's a lot. That goes on a lot with tracks, but at Tyler County, so there's some questions there. So they had to move it somewhere. I guess the Hillbilly, goes to Lernerville, which we also have the firecracker, right? Like, so that is a concern. And what you're seeing is, I do think there's a lot of parallels to be made, when we talk about NASCAR and our sport becoming more and more like NASCAR, clearly with the money we just talked about, the increase in money. We've talked about the technology and how it may or may not be hurting the racing, in some instances.
But are we doing what NASCAR did 20 years ago?
Well, that's the concern. Like, you're seeing tracks that are like Tyler County is an old school, it's a dirt track, right? Like, and not that Lernerville isn't, but it has become more and more of a big race facility, right? And so, same thing with the Dirt Track World Championship, which I'm all for it being at Eldora. I'm not saying it shouldn't have gone there, but it went from a legit dirt track to a like when I say legit dirt track, more grassroots, right? Like where our sport comes from, to a track that's the most like NASCAR that we have, right? So, there is a concern that, 5 years from now, is there going to be such a, I feel like what hurt NASCAR was it became so different than what its fan base. And there's debate over whether it's been hurt or not. It just signed $1 billion or something TV contract, so it's doing fine. But as far as what I see, like I literally haven't watched a NASCAR race all year.
Couldn't tell you that. What do they got? 8 guys left in the chase. I guess Larson's still in it.
If it wasn't for Larson,
did he win?
I don't know.
People were posting about him. That usually means he either won Sunday or he was trying to win.
So, and I feel like the thing about NASCAR is it could afford to alienate its fan base, because it was reaching such a big audience, and still does on television and driving, TV revenue, that it didn't need all these fans coming to all the races, and could afford. And it already had, still, even as attendance numbers dropped, they were still pretty good. But point being is, we're in dirt track world, we can't afford to alienate our fan base, right? Like
or to make it to where they can't go see a race.
Yes.
Like if you're, I feel like Alabama, Georgia, Carolinas. There's a lot of dirt track fans there.
There are.
And you're not going to go unless you travel a pretty significant distance. You're not going to have the opportunity to go to a Lucas Oil Late Model Dirt Series race. Same thing with the racers, right? You're not going to have racers who have an opportunity, like take someone from our area, unless
like Joseph, when he went to Magnolia a few years ago and made
to the Clash
at the Mag, which is no longer a Lucas Oil race,
right?
you know, you don't have that opportunity, right? Like to go and feel like you know, that was a big stepping stone back a few years ago for Joseph when he was, you know, we were making that step. It was before we've been to Eldora and all that, and that's, you know, that's kind of going away. You know,
I feel like it also, like you lose some character. Like you need, and I know a lot of these tracks, you know, they're not big event facilities, and you know, I know there's some questions about their, I don't know.
Look, it's not all on the series. Like the tracks, like there's a lot of tracks that could do a lot better.
But
you know,
I just feel like you're losing some character with these, you know, these old school grassroots dirt tracks.
Yes.
And instead going to the Eldora and the Lucas Oil of the world racetracks, I just worries me some. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I go back to, I don't, you know, NASCAR with, you know, reaching the mass audience that it was reaching. And even if, you know, there's a lot of people who aren't NASCAR fans but are aware of it and will tune into a race every now and then, or go to a race because it's cool, right, every now and then. Like, you know, the NASCAR reach is more a part of the, you know, overall society, right? Like it's seen as a legit sport.
Dirt track racing is far more niche.
Yes, and grassroots. And if it leaves behind it, if the top level of our sport leaves behind the grassroots level, like I think long term, that's not good for either, right? Like I don't think the top level can survive if, you know, if that divide becomes, and I'm not saying it's not, you know, it's not to the point that, you know, it's just there's a little concern there as we go forward. If more that you see these more grassroots tracks, you know, drop off the schedule and be replaced by the big events that are big event facilities that already have big events, you know, there's a concern there. But you know, I will say it's you know, nothing against Lucas. Clearly, they're doing what they have to do to have a great series and be able to offer that money to drivers. You know, put on a great show. That's their goal. You know, right? It's good for the fans in attendance. Good for the people watching online. Good for the promoters and good for the drivers and teams. So that's what they felt like they needed to do. Obviously, the World of Outlaws still draws a lot of attention, and I do know they haven't come out with their schedule yet, but I've kind of keeping up with it as we're doing our schedule and talking with different tracks, and the Outlaws guys. I think there's going to be a little more Southeast flavor.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a vacuum there. I mean, it's helped us with the front series.
Hey, that's I'll be 100% honest with you. That's where the niche we are filling, or the market we are filling, is, you know, the tracks that you know are capable of hosting big events but can't get a national tour event, or not getting the same amount they were. We're kind of able to fill that void. That's where we're finding our sweet spot with a lot of these tracks, and, you know, giving them that option to have a big event, you know, even though they're not national touring events.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll say on that subject is, you know, obviously we speaking of sweet spots, we kind of know where we are as a race team, and running regionally with the front series, going to Eldora and running in the South primarily. Other than that, but if you ever were to take Joseph and let's go run a national tour, it'd be a lot harder for where we're coming from, this region, to want to go run Lucas.
Yeah,
because you don't get a home game. You know what I mean?
Or you just don't get to go home.
No, hardly. Yeah, exactly. You're just it's just go drive, you know, north and west, and then that's where you're racing from. You ain't right. You're not coming back down this way.
Yeah.
Whereas World Outlaws, I guess,
we'll see. Their schedule is going to be a little different, and I think and we already saw it. They went to Louisiana and Texas, and I mean that crowd at
Rocket on Saturday and Boot Hill Friday
shows you there's an appetite for it.
Well, and then but if you pull out from those people, you know, like, it's great they can watch online, but there's nothing that beats being able to go to that event and be tied to that event and to that series and to those drivers, because they see them every year, once a year.
I think eventually those fans in that fan base, if you don't serve that area, there's a chance they lose interest.
Yes.
Right. Like, you know, I think the racers are always, you know, there's always going to be racers who race, but, you know, I think there are going to be some fans that lose interest if they don't have that big event somewhere close by that they feel a connection to. And I think long term, that's, you know, going to hurt the whole sport, the streaming, the national level with the attention it gets. You got to keep the grassroots level of the sport energized and engaged, to keep the top level growing, I feel like.
But not to beat a dead horse, but like you said, it's not just the series that is to blame.
No,
right?
I mean,
it's just the money, and as guys want more and more money to go do this. Car owners, you know, it doesn't pay enough. We got to have more money. This costs too much. Well, when as purses go up, places just can't afford to have these that level of events to pay that level of purse. I think to me is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and if these series try to institute rules, cost saving rules, all the drivers and teams do is complain.
Yeah,
right. Like, and
we are our own worst enemies, I guess. But anyway, it was it's an interesting
I just want to add again. There, and because we had a conversation with Rick Swally of Lucas Oil Series about this. You and I think Joseph and Jesse were in there too. You know, and trying to, hey, y'all need to get more in our area so we can race with you more. This was at Speed Weeks last year
at Alltech.
And very frank conversation about how, you know, a lot of the facilities in the South, the race facilities, you know,
are old and outdated.
Yes, and not only that, but they also want to run
12 sport divisions.
Like, and you know, there's a product that Lucas Oil and their streaming partner Flow Racing are trying to put on. Yeah. And
clearly that does work. Look at all the money that's coming in.
Exactly. It does not work, or say it doesn't work. It doesn't fit their model and their product, you know, to have that, like you just said, you know, even 7 support divisions, which
I think there's also a concern when you come into the South with the racing itself and tracks rubbering and that kind of thing.
Well, listen, I think tracks are starting to realize that and are doing it, like Talladega. That was, you know, we just raced there. It was the best racing I've seen there.
Yep. I seen you were talking about people were posting about this on Facebook. I seen a lot of people throwing that our race there as an example of tracks racing.
Cherokee Speedway. Thunder Hill had great racing. Cherokee Speedway had you know, some of our race there earlier this year was one of the best races I've seen there in a long time. And they just had the Mid-East Series there for the Duval Memorial, had a really great race. So, you know, I look at like Swainsboro where, you know, it's a track that they've been around for a long time. They reconfigured it and they've been working at it. And it's making
our races there have been good.
Why not? We've talked about, you know, so it's not lost on these tracks
River
that we have to put on a better product. You know, it's just it's a work in progress.
Right.